All right, we were talking about fat and lipids and oils, waxes, all those. And we're talking about one of the main characteristics, long-term storage of high energy. They have 9 calories per gram. Now, if that's good or bad. If you're thinking about terms and calories of trying to work off fat, then yes, you're going to have to do over twice as much work to burn the same as say a gram of fat than you would a gram of sugar. On the other hand, it's an efficient way to store it. If you had to store the same amount of energy that's in your fat as starch, for example, it would have to take up twice as much room, weigh twice as much, and it would be that much more heavier to carry around with you. So it's actually good for us that it's a high amount of calories per gram, because that way we can store a lot of energy in a small amount of space as compared to starch and so forth. Okay, but once you deposit it as fat, then it's difficult to get rid of because you have to exercise twice as much. Now, fat, when your body uses energy, first it burns up the sugar that's available, then it goes looking for starch, and then it goes looking for fat. And so it's generally, that's why it's harder to burn the fat, because your body burns up the other things first, or easier to get to and easier to burn. Then it goes back and starts burning off your reserve fat. So that makes it a little more difficult to get rid of. Also, then if your body didn't have any fat, it would go to proteins and muscle tissue, and that's why you see people in third world countries and so forth that are starving. They begin to get emaciated because their body's basically digesting their muscles, trying to keep itself alive. All right. Another characteristic of fats are they're used to protect the outer layer of organisms. Okay. For example, your skin. Your skin has oils, and those oils are there to protect your skin. All right. Of course, we don't like oily skin and oily hair, so we take baths and wash it all off, which makes our skin dry, which makes our hair all frizzy, and so we have to put conditioners and hand creams back on, which is basically putting oils back into our hands. But I'm not saying you shouldn't take baths. I'm just saying that you're kind of defeating their own purpose there. Okay. Some other characteristics: they are not soluble in water. Okay, they can't be dissolved in water. There are some things that are dissolved in fat. Vitamins, for example, some fat-soluble vitamins. Water-soluble vitamins, if you take more than you need, they just get flushed out in your urine. Fat-soluble ones, on the other hand, though, will build up in your fat. And so if it's a bad chemical like a poison and it's fat soluble, you can start accumulating it in your body, and that could be a bad thing because that poison would build up. Where if it's water soluble, it's probably going to go out in your urine before it builds up to enough to be a problem. All right. And just worth mentioning, one last one is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a lipid. Sterol, same word we get steroids from. It's used to make different kinds of steroids, such as testosterone and other sex hormones that both males and females have in their body. So you need cholesterol, and it has functions in your body. Very important steroids that your body makes and so forth come from that. It's used to make different vitamins, obviously like testosterone, some chemicals called bile salts that are very important. So cholesterol is not a bad thing. Too much cholesterol, when it starts clogging up your arteries, that is a bad thing. But in themselves, just like fats, they're not necessarily a bad thing. The third group we need to do, we've done carbohydrates now, we've talked about lipids. This is also one that's found on your label of your food, and that is proteins, okay? Proteins are chains or polymers, okay, and they contain nitrogen. A lot of times when we talk about which elements do you need, they are proteins are one of the main reasons you need nitrogen. Polymers made up of smaller units or monomers known as amino acids. Okay, and so amino acids are the monomers. You hook them together, they make proteins, or sometimes they're called polypeptides. If you have amino acid shakes, the idea is you drink that, you have a lot of these amino acids, and then if you do weightlifting or something to help encourage your body to build muscle, it'll have the protein it needs to build them. All right. Of course, if you don't do the exercise, then it's not going to build anything. So it's just up to you there. All right. Amino acids, that should sound a little familiar. We talked, when we were talking about the other organic compounds, hydrocarbons, we talked about groups. There was an amine group, and we have the acidic group, or carboxylic acid group. We're going to say acid group with a double bond oxygen OH. Well, if you put those together, you get an amino acid, okay? And so that makes sense and kind of fits in with what we talked about before, so that's good. Now, most of these many of these we can build. We have about 26 to 28, I think, something like that, maybe 23 is all, different amino acids, and they're used to build all thousands of kinds of protein in your body. Okay, but there's a certain number of those. Now, of those, I believe there's 11, but at any rate, they're called the essential amino acids. Okay, I'm just put AA for amino acid, but they're essential amino acids. Now, what does that mean? Are the other ones not essential? No, they're all essential. These are ones, though, that our bodies cannot make. Okay, our bodies cannot make these. Okay, and cannot build these. So we must have them. They must be in our diet. And if we don't eat food that have these amino acids and give us these amino acids, then there are going to be certain proteins that we cannot build. So they're called essential, not because they're more important than the other ones, but they have to be in our diet. Otherwise, we can't do that. The other amino acids, we can build them out of the chemicals and building blocks to make it. Okay, and so that's why these are considered essential. They're not that necessarily more important. Now, why are proteins important? All right, let's just hit a couple of main things. One is they're used to build body structures. Okay, used to build body structures. Collagen is one, and you will also see this added to shampoos and various things like that. Another one is keratin. Okay, keratin in these. Keratin's like in our is mostly in our hair, nails, fingernails, also in our skin. The outer layer of our skin is mostly keratin, which makes it kind of tough and resistant to things reacting with it. Collagen, on the other hand, is found in bones, cartilage, and tendons and things like that. So it's also very important. These are very common. They're two of the most common proteins you find. So that's one reason they're important. Now, possibly, I don't know if I say more important. Both of the reasons are important. We need them. But another important is that proteins are enzymes. Okay, proteins are enzymes, or you could use the word catalyst. Okay, generally if it's in a living thing we call it an enzyme. If it's in a laboratory we call it a catalyst. But an enzyme or catalyst is just chemicals that control when, which reactions, and how fast the reactions take place. Okay, that's probably not all good grammar, but that's kind of it. Okay, enzymes have to be present for certain reactions to happen. If they're not there, they either don't happen or they happen so slowly that they don't do it. So they speed them up, and so these are things that control when the reactions happen, which reactions happen, and how fast those reactions happen and take place. Okay, so these are enzymes. They're very important. A lot of reactions, if we didn't have enzymes, wouldn't happen fast enough to keep us alive, and so we really need these enzymes to speed things up and so forth. The enzymes, if you see, remember we had sugars. You notice the sugars we had, like glucose and all those, ended in OSE. Well, these end in ASE. So, for example, if you had lactase, that tells you that's an enzyme that breaks down lactose. Lactose would be the sugar. Lactase would be the enzyme that breaks it down. And so people who are lactose intolerant, they can't digest lactose. Its problem is they don't have lactase. So they can either take tablets that contain lactase, and then they can drink milk products and so forth, and they'll have that enzyme, and it'll break it down normally. Or they just have to get foods that have had the lactose taken out of it. Okay, but yeah, that's those. Now, these enzymes can be activated. All right, when you need them to work, they can be activated, and then they can be deactivated when you're done with them, because you don't want that reaction to keep going on all the time. So they have like an on-off switch, if you will, and they can be activated and deactivated whenever we need them. Okay. Last thing is proteins have 4 calories per gram, just like carbohydrates do. Okay, so once again, that's why we don't use them to store energy, because it's a lot more efficient to do that with fats. All right, we are going to look at our last group. Our last group is called nucleic acid. And people say, I've never heard of those, probably, when you first hear that. But if you think about it, the abbreviation is Na, nucleic acid, then yes, you have probably heard of these because these are DNA and RNA. Okay, this one's called deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, and this one is called ribonucleic acid because this one has ribose sugar in it, and this one has deoxyribose sugar. So DNA, the D comes from deoxyribose sugar, and RNA from ribose sugar. Okay, and they are polymers of a type of monomer called nucleotides. Okay, so you put these nucleotides together and they form a strand of DNA or RNA. Okay, and roll this up a little quick right here, and the parts are real quickly. These are called nitrogen bases. These are sugars. Okay, once again, if it's RNA, it'd be ribose sugar. If it's DNA, it'd be deoxyribose sugar. Okay, these have these nitrogen, I'm just going to put in an N for nitrogen bases. Okay, and then there's a group called, it's PO4, so that would be a phosphate group. All right, you see that same pattern: sugar, nitrogen base, phosphate group, sugar, nitrogen base, phosphate group, and you make strands. DNA has two strands. Oops, strands. Okay, strands. Let me try that again. All right, two strands, and RNA is a copy of the DNA, and it only has one strand. Okay, it copies just one side of the DNA. All right. Basically, DNA has all the instructions for building the proteins that make your body work. Okay, so it's instructions for all the proteins that make your body work. All right, and if you don't have those missing a protein, then you might have, for example, diabetes. If you don't have insulin, which is a hormone or protein basically that's been made. If you don't have that, then you don't have that. Another one might be color. You could be albino. That might not be as serious. It still has implications, but depending on what the protein is, how serious that could be if they get messed up. So DNA is the instructions for that. Now, just like I have original copies of all my worksheets, I don't hand out my originals to the students. I give them copies. Well, the DNA stays in the nucleus of the cell, and it makes RNA copies that it sends out to the cell to tell it what to do. If something happens to the RNA, then it can just run another copy and send it out to the cell to tell it what to do. Okay, and so that does that. Anytime a cell is getting ready to make a new one, it's going to set right before it divides. It has to replicate, which just means to copy. Okay, it makes a copy so that when it makes two new cells, each new cell will have a copy, because without DNA, if the DNA dies or something happens to it, it gets destroyed, the whole cell is going to die. Okay, and that's basically the important things about nucleic acids. It's also how we pass on genetic information. Okay, when we say that you get your eyes from your mother, that means the proteins, the information from the proteins that make your eye color, you got the same ones that your mom had, and so you're passing on that trait, and the same is true for other traits as well. All right, so these are it. You have carbohydrates, you have lipids, you have proteins, and you have nucleic acids, all important parts of your body and organic chemicals. And that is it for today.